Spring rain glazed the Manhattan skyline as Sloane Avery moved through the rooftop gala with her camera pressed against her palm. Below, headlights streamed along reflective streets, while the East River shimmered between towers of glass. Above, flower-covered terraces, crystal tables, and sheltered gardens held the kind of people whose names appeared on hospitals, museums, and sealed court records. Sloane had been hired as the official photographer, yet most guests treated her as though she belonged to furniture. They handed her empty glasses, stepped into her path, and expected her to smile whenever they ignored her instructions. Her photographs would preserve their generosity, but few of them bothered to remember her name. Across the rooftop, a man stood alone behind the tinted glass of a private terrace. Roman Vale had watched Sloane from a distance for 3 years. He was 34, broad-shouldered, heavily built, and dressed in a charcoal suit that made his tattooed hands appear even more dangerous. Across the East Coast underworld, men lowered their voices when speaking his name. Sloane had never met him, but she had sometimes felt his attention in crowded streets, subway stations, and late-night assignments. She had blamed the sensation on the anxiety left by a childhood shaped by loss. Roman had never intended to approach her. Then Declan Cross arrived. Publicly, Declan was the polished son of a respected property developer. Roman knew him as the heir to a rival criminal family whose influence stretched through private security firms, political offices, and luxury real estate. The moment Declan noticed the antique camera hanging from Sloane's shoulder, his attention sharpened. He waited until she reached the glass railing overlooking the river. Declan blocked her path and reached for the camera. When Sloane stepped away, his hand closed around her wrist. Several guests witnessed it. None intervened. Declan's family funded the gala, and powerful men were often granted permission no woman had given simply because everyone nearby feared the cost of objecting. Sloane pulled against his grip. Her face remained composed, but anger burned beneath her restraint. She refused to lower her eyes or soften her resistance for the comfort of those watching. Across the terrace, Roman moved. The conversations nearest him faded first. Then the entire rooftop quieted as he crossed the garden. His controlled expression was more threatening than rage. He reached Sloane and removed Declan's hand from her wrist with deliberate calm. That was when Roman saw the signet ring. An engraved symbol curved across the silver surface, a compass crossed by a broken crown. Atlas. Declan had not touched Sloane out of arrogance alone. He had been confirming her identity. Roman's men silently sealed the building exits. At street level, unfamiliar black vehicles stopped beneath the awning as Declan's guards gathered near the elevators. Sloane looked at Roman, unsettled by the recognition in his eyes. He knew the camera. He knew Declan's purpose. Worse, he seemed to know her. Roman ordered his organization to protect her, fully aware that every rival family would interpret the command as a declaration of war. The first gunshot shattered the glass behind them. Roman pulled Sloane against his chest as bullets tore through the terrace flowers. While dragging her toward the emergency stairwell, he called her by the childhood name no one had used since her mother's supposed death. Roman moved Sloane to the emergency stairwell before Declan's men could seal the tower. By dawn, they had left Manhattan behind and reached a secluded Hudson Valley estate surrounded by wooded hills, stone gardens, sailing docks, and mist drifting above the river. Roman gave her a suite and kept his distance, but freedom inside guarded walls felt conditional. Her phone filled with alerts before breakfast. News reports blamed her for the rooftop violence, while edited footage showed Declan appearing concerned and Sloane resisting him without context. Commentators examined her race, working-class childhood, unpaid college debt, and financial struggles as though hardship proved dishonesty. The wealthy witnesses who had watched Declan seize her wrist protected him because their businesses depended on his family. Roman obtained the original security recording, which clearly showed Declan cornering her and reaching for the antique camera. Yet even evidence seemed weaker than a powerful family's reputation. Sloane understood that society demanded perfect innocence from ordinary women, while granting influential men endless explanations. Protection without consent, however, could become another form of control. Even when the watcher claimed he had saved her, determined to understand why Roman knew her childhood name, Sloane searched the estate while his guards monitored the perimeter. Behind a library panel, she discovered a room, The code yielded to the date of the ferry fire that had killed her mother 11 years earlier. Inside, walls and cabinets held photographs of Sloane's apartment, workplaces, daily routes, and assignments. Some images were recent. Others showed her years before the gala, unaware beneath umbrellas, subway lights, and hotel awnings. The discovery hollowed out Roman's protection until it resembled surveillance. When he entered, he neither denied the files nor attempted to justify them. Instead, he unlocked cabinets and surrendered the keys, accepting her anger as something he had earned. The records explained that Roman's younger sister, Tessa Vale, had identified Sloane as the girl who pulled her from a burning ferry. After the disaster, several criminal families had searched for an unidentified survivor. Roman believed approaching Sloane would expose her, so he watched from a distance and quietly redirected threats before they reached her. Sloane refused to mistake secrecy for kindness. His choices might have kept her alive, but they had also taken away her right to know who was shaping her life. Roman accepted that judgment without asking forgiveness. Among the files, she found a thick folder devoted to the antique camera inherited from Sloane Avery. Atlas records suggested its lens housing concealed evidence capable of exposing protected accounts, false identities, and political alliances. Declan's family had spent years searching for it. The hand around Sloane's wrist had never been an act of careless entitlement alone. It had been a test to confirm that Evelyn's daughter still carried the camera. An alarm cut through the estate. Armed men advanced from the river, while another team disabled the power and security network. Glass broke across the western hall. Roman guided Sloane to the gardens toward a waterfall spilling over limestone cliffs. Behind the water, a tunnel descended to a hidden dock where a motorboat waited beneath the mist. Before boarding, Sloane grabbed the final surveillance folder from Roman's emergency case. Inside was a photograph unlike all the others. Evelyn stood outside a wooden cabin, older but unmistakably alive, looking directly toward whoever held the camera. A timestamp in the lower corner proved the image had been taken only 48 hours earlier in the Adirondack Mountains. The photograph from the Hudson State gave Sloane only one direction, and she refused to let Roman decide whether she should follow it. They reached the Adirondack Mountains beneath bright winter snowfall, traveling along narrow roads bordered by frozen lakes and pine forests. Roman warned that the cabin could be a trap, but he did not attempt to stop her. He followed several steps behind, honoring his promise that protection would no longer mean controlling her movements. Tessa joined them because the photograph had awakened fragments of the ferry fire she had spent 11 years trying to forget. The wooden cabin stood beyond a frozen lake, surrounded by snow-covered trees. Its door was unlocked. Warm ashes remained beneath the fireplace, suggesting someone had left only hours earlier. Inside, Sloane found clothing in her mother's size, prescription medicine labeled for Sloane Avery, and handwritten notes she recognized from childhood. Government databases still declared Evelyn dead, yet every object in the cabin proved that official records had buried a living woman. The files hidden beneath the floorboards revealed how easily that burial had happened. Judges, private contractors, and medical officials had issued false death certificates for witnesses connected to Atlas. Most victims came from working-class neighborhoods, immigrant families, and minority communities whose disappearances attracted little attention. Powerful institutions had not needed to prove those people were dead. They only needed society to consider them unimportant enough not to search for. Tessa's memories returned as she examined photographs from a ferry. Evelyn had guided both girls through smoke-filled corridors before masked men set the vessel on fire. Sloane had believed her mother died, saving strangers. Now she wondered whether Evelyn had abandoned her afterward or remained hidden, because return would have placed Sloane in greater danger. Roman discovered a concealed staircase beneath the pantry. It led to a projection room containing archived film, financial ledgers, and recordings made during Evelyn's work as an accountant. The footage exposed Atlas as a marketplace where crime families purchased false identities, sealed court records, protected accounts, and political immunity. One evidence case contained an empty space shaped like a narrow brass cylinder. Sloane examined the antique camera hanging from her shoulder. The lens housing resisted at first, then twisted open beneath her fingers. A brass cylinder slid into her palm, hidden there since the night of the ferry fire. Roman finally revealed his own connection to that night. His father had ordered him to find the unidentified girl who escaped with Evelyn's evidence. At 19, Roman found Sloane injured near the riverbank. Instead of delivering her to the Vale organization, he carried her to an emergency entrance and erased proof that she had survived. He had remained silent because his father would have killed her for possessing the cylinder. Headlights appeared between the trees before Sloane could process the confession. Declan's men surrounded the cabin and ignited the lower level. Smoke climbed to the walls as Roman forced open a rear exit. He was shot through the shoulder while helping Sloane and Tessa cross the frozen lake, but he continued until they reached the opposite forest. Sloane inserted the brass cylinder into a portable projector recovered from the cabin. Hidden coordinates appeared across its screen, pointing toward a private vineyard in Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains. Then she found an older photograph beneath the projector case. It showed 19-year-old Roman kneeling beside her unconscious body after the ferry fire. On the back, Evelyn had written that Roman Vale was either Sloane's protector or the man sent to finish the job. The photograph from the Adirondack cabin stayed in Sloane's mind throughout the drive south. Roman had saved her from a ferry, yet he had also been sent to find her. She could not decide whether his silence had been protection, guilt, or another method of control. They reached Virginia beneath bright afternoon light, where the Blue Ridge Mountains rose beyond wildflower fields, waterfalls, and rows of grapevines. Roman remained close enough to help, but far enough to let Sloane choose whether he still belonged beside her. The estate appeared harmless. A stone manor overlooked wooden barns and green hills, while polished signs praised the Vale Foundation for protecting migrant workers and preserving regional traditions. Wealthy donors had celebrated the property for decades. Few people questioned charitable families surrounded by beautiful land. Inside an abandoned worker's barn, Sloane found another history. Names had been carved into the wooden beams, along with dates, family initials, and desperate directions to towns across the border. Several matched missing witnesses listed in Evelyn's cabin records. Former workers who discovered financial crimes have been threatened, deported under false complaints, or erased through forged documents. The vineyard had not protected vulnerable people. It had used charity to hide their disappearance. Roman studied the names without pretending his ignorance made him innocent. His family had benefited from the property, its reputation, and the silence it purchased. Even if he had not written every order, he had inherited power built upon people's society, considered easy to remove. Beneath the manor's wine cellar, Tessa discovered concealed passage leading through limestone corridors. The tunnels opened into the original Atlas archive, where aging financial ledgers filled climate control rooms. The records exposed a partnership between Roman's father and Declan's father. Together, they had created a system that sold false identities, sealed investigations, and political protection. Public officials paid for criminal histories to disappear, while inconvenient witnesses received fabricated deaths or forced removals. Evelyn had uncovered the arrangement while auditing Vale accounts. Roman's original assignment after the ferry fire had been written inside the archive. He was ordered to locate Sloane and recover the camera. Instead, he erased evidence that she survived, concealed her medical transfer, and watched her from a distance. His choice had saved her life. It had also allowed Atlas to continue destroying others. Sloane understood that protecting one woman could never excuse years of silence about hundreds more. Roman accepted that truth and began shutting down Vale alliances connected to the network. Accounts were frozen. Political arrangements were exposed. Transportation routes were closed. Several of his captains immediately rebelled. Without Atlas, they would lose the judges, officials, and police contact that had made them untouchable. Tessa activated a damaged transmission hidden within Evelyn's files. The message revealed that Sloane's brass cylinder was only the first key. The complete Atlas ledger remained beneath an abandoned observatory in southern Utah. Before the coordinates finished loading, the archive screens changed. A live feed showed Evelyn alive beside Declan Cross. Her posture appeared calm, almost cooperative, but Sloane noticed a controlled movement of her mother's fingers. Explosions shook the vineyard as Declan's forces burned the storage buildings. Roman's former captains blocked the mountain roads, forcing Sloane and Tessa through a passage behind the estate waterfall. Sloane escaped carrying the Atlas key, while Roman held back the attackers. Before the transmission vanished, Evelyn secretly signaled that Declan planned to erase Sloane's legal identity before midnight. The Utah coordinates became Sloane's only defense against the deadline Evelyn had signaled from the vineyard. She, Roman, and Tessa crossed southern Utah beneath a brilliant sky, moving between red rock canyons, desert arches, and cactus fields toward an abandoned observatory hidden beyond the public roads. Before they reached it, Declan began destroying Sloane without firing another bullet. News networks reported that she had stolen money from a Vale organization, assaulted Declan at the Manhattan Gala, and manipulated Roman into attacking innocent businesses. Fabricated arrest warrants appeared under her name. Psychiatric records described violent episodes that had never happened. Her bank accounts were frozen, her photography credentials revoked, and her apartment lease suspended. Reporters treated Roman's powerful enemies as reliable sources while examining Sloane's race, childhood poverty, and personal relationships as evidence against her. Within minutes, official databases replaced 28 years of real life with a criminal history designed by strangers. Innocence became meaningless when wealth controlled the system society trusted to define it. The observatory stood beyond a sandstone ridge, its silver dome weathered by desert wind. Beneath the main telescope platform, they discovered a biometric archive built by Evelyn and former Atlas engineers. Sloane inserted the brass cylinder into a mechanical reader. Her fingerprint opened the first security layer. The second lock required Roman's family signet. When he pressed a ring into its metal impression, the chamber awakened, revealing the complete Atlas ledger. Judges, executives, police officials, private contractors, and criminal families appeared across the screens. Each had purchased erased identities, sealed investigations, fabricated deaths, or protection from prosecution. Archive video proved Evelyn had only pretended to cooperate with Declan while under surveillance. She had redirected evidence toward the observatory and preserved records Declan believed destroyed. A security door opened behind them. Evelyn emerged with bruised wrists and exhaustion carved across her face, having escaped her guards through an old maintenance passage. Sloane reached her mother, but relief collided with anger. Evelyn had survived for 11 years without contacting her. Roman had watched from the shadows for 3. Both had shaped Sloane's life through decisions she had never been allowed to make. Evelyn explained that any contact would have exposed the antique camera. The reason carried logic, but it could not restore the years Sloane had spent grieving. Roman offered no defense for his own secrecy. He placed every Vale account key, private route, safe house location, and surveillance code into Sloane's control. It was the first time he surrendered power without treating forgiveness as payment. They began copying the ledger. Armored vehicles appeared between the canyon walls before the transfer finished. Declan's forces opened fire on the observatory, blocking the northern road. Roman destroyed profitable desert transport routes and fuel depots to create an evacuation corridor. Evelyn was injured while guiding hidden witnesses through underground water tunnels. During the confusion, Declan reached the archive, stole a partial copy of the ledger, and announced a private New Orleans auction where political protection would be sold to the highest bidders. Sloane preserved the original evidence by sealing it inside the antique camera. As they escaped through the tunnels, the final Atlas file opened on her screen and identified the judge preparing to erase her identity as one of the invited buyers attending Declan's auction. The final Atlas file led Sloane to New Orleans, where bright rainfall polished the historic streets and turned the Mississippi waterfront into a sheet of reflected light. Declan's auction occupied a private riverfront club surrounded by garden courtyards, iron balconies, and steamboats moving beyond the windows. Sloane entered carrying her antique camera and wearing credentials of the official event photographer. No one examined her closely. To the judges, politicians, executives, and crime leaders arriving beneath silk umbrellas, workers were useful precisely because they were considered too insignificant to notice anything. Private screens displayed sealed identities, false passports, erased convictions, and protected bank accounts. Guests selected Atlas services as casually as luxury investments. Sloane photographed their faces while secretly recording every conversation. A corporate attorney described missing workers as administrative losses. A judge dismissed minority witnesses as people without enough influence to create consequences. Several guests discussed Sloane herself, claiming her race, profession, and working-class upbringing made her socially unsuitable for Roman. Their expensive clothing had convinced society they possessed moral authority, even as they purchased the power to erase innocent lives. Declan appeared before the gathering and presented himself as the victim of Sloane's manipulation. He blamed her for the violence in Manhattan and claimed Roman had abandoned reason because of her. Then the ballroom doors opened. Roman entered publicly as the Vale Mafia Don. He brought no visible army. Instead, he activated the account keys he had surrendered to Sloane. Criminal funds froze across multiple banks. Transportation routes were canceled. Private aircraft were grounded. Shipping contracts terminated, and evidence against corrupt officials transmitted to independent journalists. Several Vale captains turned against him immediately. Destroying Atlas meant ending the political immunity that had protected their organization for decades. While panic spread through the club, Tessa descended into the lower service levels and located Evelyn inside a private holding room. Sloane reached the central archive, inserted the camera evidence, and reversed the records created against her. Her employment history returned first, then her bank accounts, apartment lease, professional credentials, and legal identity reappeared across government databases. Sloane transmitted the auction recordings to journalists and federal investigators, restoring her name with the same evidence powerful men had tried to bury. Declan responded by exposing Roman surveillance files. Sloane discovered that Roman had once authorized secret entry into her apartment to search the antique camera. The intrusion had happened before the rooftop gala, while she still believed her home belonged entirely to her. Roman did not defend the violation or claim his intentions made it acceptable. He accepted responsibility and transferred every remaining Clean Vale asset into an independent restitution trust controlled by Atlas victims. Gunfire shattered the river-facing windows before the transfer completed. Declan's allies attacked the club as Roman and Sloane reached the lower holding room. They freed Evelyn and escaped through the garden courtyard, but Declan disappeared into tunnels beneath the riverfront with the central Atlas server. A stolen security feed revealed his destination, an isolated glacier lodge in Alaska. He intended to connect Atlas directly to medical, banking, and government systems, then erase every surviving witness before sunrise. The countdown began as Declan displayed Tessa's stolen medical identity as the first life he intended to erase. The stolen feed from New Orleans led them north before Declan's countdown reached its final hours. Sloane, Roman, Evelyn, and a small team of federal witnesses entered the Alaskan Glacier Valley through a frozen service tunnel hidden beneath a pine forest. Above them, bright snowfall covered the mountains, the frozen river, and a glass lodge glowing against a blue-white landscape. Beneath that beauty, Declan had built the central Atlas server facility. He had already connected Atlas to banking, medical, police, and federal identification systems. Once the sequence finished, surviving witnesses would lose their real histories. Their names would be replaced by criminal records, psychiatric classifications, debts, and arrest warrants. Sloane understood that Atlas no longer needed to kill people. It could make the world believe they had never deserved protection. She and Evelyn moved toward the control wing, while Roman searched the medical chambers for Tessa. Digital screens showed identities vanishing one by one as the countdown continued. Inside the glass lodge above the glacier, Declan confronted Roman beside the Central Surveillance Archive. He accused Roman of destroying generations of Vale power for a woman who might never forgive him. Roman no longer measured protection by what it could earn. The danger surrounding Sloane had been created by his family, strengthened by his silence, and continued through the systems he once commanded. Saving her did not entitle him to her trust, loyalty, or love. In the control wing, Sloane inserted the original camera files into the Atlas terminal. Evelyn activated the reversal code hidden within her old accounting records. The system resisted, then began restoring the victims in reverse order. Legal names returned. Bank accounts reopened. Medical histories reappeared. Arrest warrants disappeared. Families erased for years became visible again to the institutions that had abandoned them. Roman reached the surveillance archive and destroyed every private route, tracker, safe house, account, and hidden camera controlled by the Vale organization. The action erased the power that had allowed him to follow Sloane without consent. When the network collapsed, he ensured he would never be able to secretly find her again. Tessa was discovered unconscious inside a medical chamber seconds before Atlas deleted her identity. Evelyn carried her toward the evacuation tunnel, while Declan fled across the frozen river. A rescue aircraft landed near the collapsing lodge, giving Sloane a clear path away from violence. She boarded, then saw Declan climbing onto a suspended platform above Roman with a weapon raised. Sloane returned. Her decision came from freedom, not possession, fear, debt, or obligation. She disrupted Declan long enough for federal agents to surround him. Several former Vale soldiers demanded his execution, but Roman ordered them aside. A public trial would expose the officials Atlas had protected far more effectively than revenge. Declan was taken alive as the remaining servers failed beneath the lodge. During the evacuation, Sloane boarded an independent aircraft without revealing her destination. Roman watched it disappear into the snowfall and refused to use his former contacts, surveillance routes, or aircraft records to follow her. For the first time, he allowed her absence to belong entirely to her. 3 weeks later, Roman received a photograph of Sloane standing alone beside an Oregon lighthouse. 3 weeks after leaving Alaska, Sloane settled near the Oregon coast inside a small restore house overlooking evergreen cliffs, waterfalls, and the bright Pacific. The lighthouse in the photograph stood beyond a rocky beach where the river estuary met the sea. She no longer hid behind borrowed names. Her real identity had been restored, but that freedom carried responsibilities. Using the clean assets Roman had transferred, Sloane established an independent legal foundation for people erased by Atlas. Former criminal properties became emergency shelters. Private medical facilities reopened as public clinics, while transportation companies were reorganized as worker-owned businesses. For the first time, properties once designed to control vulnerable people gave them somewhere safe to begin again. Roman remained in New York, cooperating with federal investigators and accepting responsibility for the organization he had commanded. He surrendered financial records, identified corrupt alliances, and testified against former Vale captains. Declan and dozens of judges, executives, and officials faced public trials built upon the evidence preserved inside Sloane's camera. Evelyn began documenting witnesses whose disappearances had once been dismissed because they lacked wealth or influence. Tessa rebuilt her identity outside the Vale organization, choosing work and friendships untouched by the family name. Roman received Sloane's lighthouse photograph, but he sent no guards, aircraft, trackers, or private investigators. He waited until she contacted him through an independent attorney, who confirmed that he no longer possessed access to her location. Only then did Roman travel to Oregon. He arrived alone, carrying no weapon and making no demands. Instead of entering the lighthouse property, he waited beside the outer gate until Sloane chose to meet him near the river estuary. Their reunion was quiet. Roman's destruction of Atlas could not erase the years he had watched her without permission. His sacrifices did not transform surveillance into devotion or secrecy into trust. Sloane understood that powerful men were often praised for surrendering control they should never have possessed. Still, she recognized that Roman had dismantled the very system that once allowed him to find her anywhere. She agreed to rebuild their relationship slowly, under conditions she controlled. Sloane would keep her own home, finances, photography career, and complete authority over the Restitution Foundation. Roman would receive no private access to her records, movements, or professional life. He accepted a place beside her rather than in front of her. Roman had not earned Sloane because Declan touched her at a rooftop gala. He had earned only the possibility of trust by destroying the empire that allowed powerful men to treat women like property. Weeks later, Sloane began restoring Evelyn's antique camera at a work table facing the ocean. Beneath the damaged lens, she found a second hidden compartment containing undeveloped film. Evelyn helped process it. The photograph showed a younger Sloane standing inside the ferry terminal years before Roman began watching her. Across the crowded platform, another man observed her from beneath a dark coat. Evelyn identified him as the current director of the federal task force investigating Atlas. When Sloane enlarged the image, a second Atlas symbol appeared on the director's hand. Roman had not been the first powerful man watching Sloane, and the oldest observer had just learned where she lived.